Hey Mama, I'm so glad you're here. We are chatting today about encouraging your husband with your words. So, I did a blog post and a podcast episode about scriptures that you can pray over your husband, and today I'm talking about encouraging him through the words that we say. And not just in our conversations with him. It's not just the words that we say to him, it's just the words that we say about him. And that's what I'm going to be getting into. So it's more than just being a Christian mom. Is It's more than just focusing on ourselves and our relationship with God. It's also focusing on that relationship with our husbands and building that relationship and making it strong, because that is the foundation for our children. It's how they see how they should be interacting with their future spouses, and we want them to know kind of they need to know what to do. They need to know what to say and how to interact. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So wherever you're at today, Mama, grab that cup of tea. If you're on the go, then get the volume turned up and let's get into this. Hey Mama, I know you're busy. You're living in piles of laundry, you don't know what you're making for your next meal, and there's a really annoying kid song stuck in your head. And through all of this, you're wondering how you're going to build a joyful Christian home. How do I know all of this? Because that was me. Hi, I'm Alyssa, teacher turned stay-at-home boy mom, blogger, podcaster, and Jesus lover. And I know that while this motherhood journey is beautiful, it's also messy. And the best way to enjoy it is to invite God into our chaos and let Him be the rest that we so desperately need. So together, let's strengthen your relationship with God. Let's build a Christian home that is built on biblical truths and enjoy this motherhood journey. You got this, Mama. Encouraging your husband with your words. I talked about taming your tongue. There's a podcast episode on that one and blog post, and the importance of taming that tongue, of using your words to build people up and to encourage your children, encourage your the people around you, and how important that is. And it's important that we're also considering that with our husbands. Our married life it's almost like going on a ride on the lazy river. It can be slow, it can be not monotonous, but it just, you're going along at a slow pace. And sometimes we forget that the person that we are going on this ride with is our partner, they're our best friend, they're the person that we have chosen to spend the rest of our life with, and we love them. And so we need to be encouraging them on this little lazy ride trip that we're taking, as it's a long ride. This is the rest of our lives that we're talking about. And as you get into it, as you get to a few years into your marriage and you start to get really comfortable with one another, it's important that we don't let that contentment, which is a good thing, but we don't want it to just fall flat. We want to keep the fire alive, keep that relationship burning, because God values marriage. Marriage is incredibly important to God. And if it's important to God, then it should be important to us. And so we need to be looking for ways that we can continue to strengthen that relationship. And as women, as wives, we need to be that helper for our husbands. I talk about how men are the head of the household and women are the heart. We are pumping the blood into our household. And yes, the husband may be making a lot of decisions, but we know that, the brain can't make a decision if it doesn't have heart pumping the blood to the brain. And so we as moms, we need to be doing that. We need to be helping our husbands. We need to be fueling them. We need to be giving them encouragement. And so one of the ways that we can do that is with our words. And so these are some ways that we can be encouraging them. And so first of all, we need to choose our words carefully. And James 1 verse 19 is it's a perfect verse for this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I know those can be hard as women, that sometimes we just want to talk. We talk first and we think later. But it is important that we are thinking about what we're saying before we say it, and that we are choosing our words carefully. That we are listening and being intentional in what we're saying. And so this isn't to say that we shouldn't say things to our husband. This isn't to say that we should be bottling up our feelings. But it might mean that we need to lay down ground rules, or we need to say to our husbands, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. This is the space that I'm coming from, the headspace I'm in. Let's talk about this. In other words, thinking about it before we say it, so that our words are not spiteful or perhaps causing unintentional pain. And so that we're listening, that we are hearing what our husbands are saying. And because sometimes that quiet, that silence is actually worth more than our words. And we can encourage them by just listening, by just giving them that listening ear. Number 2 is to build him up, to use our words to encourage him, and not to give him a big head or inflate his ego, but to let him know that you see what he's doing and you appreciate it. You hear about default parenting, how quite often mom is the default parent, and that can be hard on moms. It's a big weight to carry, where you are often the person who's responsible for children. And for the first several years, that's just kind of the way parenting goes. But your husband is also the default provider. If unless you are working as well and it's split 50-50, but if you're a stay-at-home mom, or you are on maternity leave, or maybe you're just not working full-time, then your husband is that default provider. And there's a lot of other default things that just fall to husbands. And so we share that role. You share those responsibilities. That's what marriage is. It's that shared responsibility. And it's important that we acknowledge that as well, that we say, hey, thank you for providing for our family. Thank you for paying the bills. Thank you for doing, the maintenance. My husband is always really good about making sure that the vehicles go in for oil changes, because goodness knows, I would just forget, even with that little sticker on the top of my vehicle. I'd be like, I don't even know where we're fine. It's fine. We can go for another couple kilometers. We'll be fine. But he's really good at taking care of that. And so just letting them know that you appreciate those little things, to encourage them, because they need that too. They need to know that you, as their spouse, as their partner, that you see that. Number 3 is to speak positively about your husband when he's not around. And so it's kind of like talking behind his back, only in a good way. So talk about his good qualities to your children. Talk about it to your family and your friends. Make those offhand comments about how hard he works and the things that he does that you really like. And this is really good because it also reminds you of what he does. But it's good for your children to hear this, and for a few reasons. Because first of all, they are then going to see this in their father. They see the things that he does, and they recognize those things. But it also shows them how a good husband should behave. So for your boys, it's giving them that example. It sets that example of how a man should behave in the home, how he should, the things that he can care for. But for your girls, it's also showing them about who to look for in a husband. A husband who takes care of again, like the household things. If something breaks, they fix it. If your husband helps you with the dishes after a meal, or my husband actually cooks, which is really, really nice. I think he cooks simply because he doesn't want to eat the same things over and over and over again, and I always cook the same meals on repeat. But I appreciate that about him, that he is willing to take that on, that he's willing to he tries new recipes, and he enjoys cooking. And so telling that to your children, say, Dad makes such great meals, Dad does a really good job of taking care of the lawn outside, whatever. Pointing that out to them and speaking those words of encouragement to those people, because then that's how they see them. They see your husband as someone who is good at those things, and it gives them that perspective, that positive perspective of them, and that's how they're going to interact with him, which we want. It was a good interaction. Next is to speak as a partner or a teammate. You are not his mom, you are not his teacher, you are not his student or his employee. You're a partner. You have equal stakes in the relationship. You both should be putting in 100%. It's ideally what you both should be putting into the relationship. Not that it's always going to be that way, but you still need to be speaking to your husband as that partner. And so you are both in it to win it. And so you want to remember that your spouse is not the enemy, that they are not out to get you. They're not, or at least in a healthy relationship, that is not the case. And so come into your conversations with that idea of that equal partnership, that you sometimes, you're going to have to compromise, and maybe you're going to have to make concessions based on, their needs and their wants. But have that conversation, keep those lines of communication open, and let your spouse know how you're feeling about something. And okay, well, this is how I felt, this is how I thought. Let's work through that. Let's work on this together, and set those expectations for your expectations, and making those adjustments for things, because you're a team. You want this to succeed, and make that known when you are talking to them, and encourage them in that you are in it forever. This is a lifelong commitment. Okay. And then pray over your spouse. This is also really, really important. Again, you can check out the blog post and the podcast episode about 10 verses that you can pray over your husband. But whether it's privately or publicly, so if you're privately praying over your husband just in your own quiet time, or publicly, pray over your husband, and like with your children. Sometimes at bedtime, I'll pray for my husband with my kids, again, to kind of open up their eyes to the things that their dad does, but also to pray over him. And that's a really important way of encouraging him, even if he doesn't hear you. Those prayers that you say over him. Okay, now I'm going to get into some things that you shouldn't say about your husband. So encouraging him, I suppose it's the opposite of it. So these are things that would discourage him, and so these are things that we don't want to do when we are speaking about our husband. So number one is, don't talk about his shortcomings in front of others, especially acquaintances. People that you don't know that well, or people who maybe don't know your husband that well. This is perhaps a first impression, or the only impression that they're going to get of him. And you want to make those impressions good. And so, of course, we kind of complain a little bit about, your husband he shaves and he leaves hair in the sink, or he forgot to pick up milk or something. Those little things that sometimes we kind of complain about. But when there's a bigger issue, or a story that really doesn't need to be told to a group of people who don't know you, don't know your spouse, then don't say it. Just don't. Because the words that you say, they linger in the air. It's what people remember about that person. And if they don't know them that well, then that's all they're going to know. That's what they're going to remember when they meet that person, or they see that person. And even if they are, friends, it's choosing the appropriate time for those types of stories. If you're having serious problems or serious issues, then you need to deal with those appropriately. And having those conversations with the right people means that you're going to get the right solutions. And so that might mean having that conversation with your husband, or, choosing a trusted friend. But it's not blasting all of those, the good, bad, and the ugly to just everybody, because that does come back onto your husband when people interact with them. If that's all they know, then that may reflect in the way that they speak with him, and we don't want that. And next is, don't make assumptions. So when you are speaking with your husband, don't assume that he knows what you're talking about. There's nothing more surprise than a man hearing his wife's plans for the second time. And yes, I know this to be true because my husband does it sometimes. But I think we all do it, where we maybe weren't in the right frame of mind when we heard something the first time, or we just, whatever, for whatever reason, we just forgot. And we need reminded. And it's not because we don't love our spouse or we were, purposely trying to ignore what they said. It's just being human. And we need to remember that too when we're talking to our husbands. We don't assume that they know everything, and we don't get mad if they've forgotten. Unless if you've, written it down, circled it, highlighted it, texted it to them, left them a voicemail and emailed them, and they still have forgotten, then you maybe need to have a little conversation. But for those little small everyday things, don't assume. Don't assume. Just bring fresh life to the conversation. Remember that your husband's human, you're human, and you're both broken. You both make mistakes, and that's okay. That's okay. You love them regardless of that, and you are, you're going to remind them of things and say, yes, we did talk about this, and this is what's happening on Saturday. This is now the third time that I'm telling you. And finally, don't bury feelings or emotions. And so while we don't want to speak out of anger towards our husband or anyone really, we also don't want to bury those feelings. We need to find that happy medium where we are still communicating with them about how we feel, but not in a way that is going to tear them down or break them down. And as women, we do sometimes we have that ability where we are able to really rip into somebody with our words. We can be really cunning with the sentiment behind what we're saying that sometimes can be worse than the words themselves. And so we have to be really careful that we are using our words to build our husbands up, not to tear them down, but also to not bury those feelings or emotions, to let our husbands know how we're feeling, and to say that it's not necessarily their fault or, that anyone is to blame, but just to lay it out there. This is how I'm feeling. That you trust your husband, you want to communicate with him, you want him to know what's going on in your life, and that, you want to sit down and have a conversation about something. And it's encouraging for them to know that you trust them, to know that you are, you respect them, and you want to make that connection with them. That encourages them, even if those conversations are hard. In the long run, everyone feels better after you have had those talks. So let your words help. God ordained marriage. He loves marriage. It's a beautiful thing that he has given us, and he wants husbands and wives to work together. He wants us to be a partner, to have that partnership. And so that means that we have to communicate. And as wives, it's important that we're also encouraging our husbands so that they know that we appreciate them, because sometimes they forget, just as we sometimes as moms forget that we are appreciated too. But it's good for us to show that to our husbands, and for our families to hear that, especially our children, because then our children see that we love our husbands. First of all, they see that love that we have for them, but it also then points those strengths out to our children. It points out who our husbands are, who their father is, and who they want to be when they grow up, or who they're looking for when they grow up. So there's lots of really great benefits to speaking words of encouragement to or about your husband, and praying over him. So I hope those give you some ideas that you can go out and encourage your husband, speak about your husband to your children, and let everybody know how much you love them, because they're your best friend. And that is a really neat thing, that you get to spend your life with somebody that you love. And so go and love on your husbands a little bit, mama. Have a great week. Thanks for joining me today. Can I ask you to do something for me? Subscribe, share what you've heard, and leave me a review. 3 little things that would make my day top notch. I pray your coffee stays hot, your kids stay calm, and you keep Jesus in your heart. Until next time, Mama, God bless.